Hello, and welcome to the History 11th, where we untangle the threads of the past to find the stories that shaped our world. I'm your host, Gerard Tolson, and today we're looking at a war with perhaps the most bizarre name in military history, the War of Jenkins' Ear. It sounds like a joke, or perhaps a tall tale told in a seaside tavern, but between 1739 and 1748, thousands of men died, and the maps of the Americas were nearly redrawn, all because of one man's missing ear. Or was it? To understand this war, we have to travel back to 1731, off the coast of Florida. A British brig called the Rebecca, captained by Robert Jenkins, was boarded by a Spanish Coast Guard vessel, the La Isabella. The Spanish accused Jenkins of smuggling, which, to be fair, he almost certainly was. During the confrontation, the Spanish commander, Julio Leon Fandino, reportedly lopped off Jenkins' left ear with his cutlass. According to legend, Fandino handed the ear back to the captain and said, "Go tell your king that I will do the same to him if he dares to do the same." Jenkins did exactly that. He pickled the ear in a jar of spirits and headed home. Now, you'd think a severed ear would cause an immediate international incident, but it didn't. Jenkins returned to England, told his story, and nothing happened. For 7 years, the ear sat in a jar. So why in 1738 did it suddenly become the most famous ear in London? The answer isn't about biology, it's about trade. Under the Treaty of Utrecht, Britain had been granted the Asiento, a contract giving them the exclusive right to sell enslaved people in the Spanish colonies. But the British were using this foot in the door to smuggle massive amounts of contraband by bypassing Spanish taxes. By 1738, tensions were at a breaking point. British merchants were furious about Spanish interference, and the political opposition in Parliament wanted to topple the Prime Minister, Robert Walpole, who was seen as too soft on Spain. They needed a symbol. They needed a victim. They needed Robert Jenkins. Jenkins was called to the House of Commons. He pulled out the jar, showed his shriveled ear, and the public went wild. The Patriot Whigs used it to whip the country into a pro war frenzy. Walpole, backed into a corner, finally declared war in October of 1739. The war itself was fought primarily in the Caribbean and the American seacoast southeast. One of the most significant moments was the siege of Cartagena de Indias in 1741. The British sent a massive fleet, one of the largest in history at the point, under Admiral Edward Vernon. They expected an easy victory. Instead, they met disaster, not just from Spanish cannons, but from yellow fever and malaria. Of the nearly 30,000 British troops sent to the Caribbean, thousands died, not from combat, but from diseases. It's also during this conflict that we saw a young Lawrence Washington, half brother of George Washington, serving under Admiral Vernon. Lawrence was so impressed by his commander that he later named his Virginia estate Mount Vernon. Eventually, the War of Jenkins' Ear didn't so much end as it did merge. It was swallowed up by a much larger conflict, the War of the Austrian Succession. By 1748, when the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle was signed, the borders in the Americas remained largely unchanged. So, what was the point? The War of Jenkins' Ear reminds us that history is often driven by symbols. The ear wasn't the cause of the war. Mercantilism, slavery, and imperial ego were the causes. But the ear was the narrative. It was the spark that turned a cold trade dispute into a hot, bloody war. Next time you hear about a minor incident on the news, remember Captain Jenkins and his jar. History isn't just about what happened, it's about how we choose to remember it. Thank you for joining us in this labyrinth. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. I'm your host, and we'll see you next time.
When the lights get low, 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 low. When the lights get low. See it coming. See it coming. When the lights get low, 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 low. See it coming.